So originally I was going to come out and talk goaltending this evening on tonight's show. But then after looking at some of the comments, after speaking about Bolduc, I had to go a little bit more in depth on why he was moved down to the fourth line. Is there a philosophical change in the way the Montreal Canadiens are thinking, moving away from in-season development to winning now? Let's talk some puck. Hey gang, Costa here from PuckTalk Montreal. Thanks for joining the show. And as always, please make sure you give the videos a like, subscribe to our channel, and make sure you hit the notification bell for all the latest and greatest when it comes to PuckTalk Montreal. Now, as we get started, I had to look back a couple of games and go back to the Ottawa game where the Montreal Canadiens fell by a score of 5-2, and Zach Bolduc in that game was a -2. And I had to think to myself, why is Zach Bolduc the scapegoat? Why is he paying the price for what's happening defensively on the line with Kapanen and Demidov? You don't expect a lot of defense from Demidov, that's for sure. But Kapanen, according to Marty St. Louis himself, is one of the smartest players on the Montreal Canadiens. So when you take a look at Bolduc's numbers, I mean, they're not horrible. 26 games played, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points, and he's a -4. In his career, he's a +16 player. So what does that tell you? To me, obviously, -4 is not the end of the world, okay? It means that he's been playing with guys that, like him, are not as defensively responsible, whether it was when he was playing alongside Jake Evans or Josh Anderson and goals were being scored, or whether it was on the first line where he, Cole Caufield, and Nick Suzuki allowed too many goals against. And why he's getting blamed for that alone is beyond me, because at the end of it all, a lot of what's been happening to the Montreal Canadiens has been happening from the defense because of their man-to-man coverage in the zone. So why is Zach Bolduc the scapegoat, and why the hell are they moving up Alexandre Texier? That's the question I have. He's played, 3 games with the Canadiens? Well, I looked at the numbers, right, for Bolduc overall. And when you take a look at it, right, his worst games, he's -2, right? You have a -2 versus the LA Kings in a 5-1 loss, a -2 in a 7-0 game, and a -2 in a 5-2 loss the other night versus the Ottawa Senators. So what does that tell you? When the team's getting their ass kicked, that his line lets in more goals than others? But what happens when they win? Well, normally when they win, he's either 0 or on the plus side, which is totally normal under any circumstance for any player in the National Hockey League. So why is he the one getting punished here? Why is he the one being moved down to the fourth line after just a couple of games ago, back-to-back versus Utah and the Golden Knights, he put up 5 points? Why in the world are you focusing on his defensive play? Why are you saying that because of his lack of ability to play defense, he's going to get less ice time? He already averages 12 minutes a game. How much less do you want to give him? You're talking about a guy who was a first-round pick and a guy who's shown that he could put the puck in the net. So why the punishment? Well, there's a couple of things that I looked at when it takes a look at what the Montreal Canadiens are doing, right, when it comes to Bolduc. And as I look through my notes here, because they're long, okay, there's a few things that Zach Bolduc has to change. And this goes not only for him, but it goes for Texier as well. Number one, he's still not adapted to going from playing a zone defense to a man-to-man. When he was traded from Montreal to St. Louis, I mean, obviously St. Louis plays a zone box +1. And the Canadiens under Marty St. Louis are notoriously a team that plays man-to-man. So he's admitted that he's had trouble adjusting to that system, which is totally normal, even if it's just 26 games into his tenure with the Montreal Canadiens. There's also a point where his timing and reads are inconsistent. In man-to-man, a winger has to track his assignment very carefully, adjust to his teammates' positioning, react to turnovers, and make split-second decisions. And those decisions, given Bolduc's age are coming a little bit later than you'd like. That's because, of course, he's not used to it. So there's a step where in man-to-man, you have to cover your guy. Once your team gets possession of the puck, though, that changes from being in man-to-man to attacking in a group and in a cluster, as I always say. So when Bolduc sees that, he's got to react to where his teammates are, where he has to be, and so on. And that's hurting him because he's not quite used to what his line mates do as far as that man-to-man coverage is concerned and how they get out of it when they break out of the zone. Now, here's the kicker. He hasn't played consistently on the line since the beginning of the season, right? Because of the injuries. So expecting him to be able to adapt more quickly is a little bit unfair given the circumstances. But, I'll get to that later when I talk about the Canadiens' philosophical shift. The Canadiens don't really trust him in defensive situations. Now, Bolduc, when he was acquired, was brought in as a guy who was expected to play well 5-on-5, bring a physical aspect to his game, and be able to complement other guys on his line. Well, up until this point, 5-on-5, he's played an average of 10 minutes, 42 seconds per game. And that's about 10th among the forwards on the team. That's not really great. So his limited usage is one of those things that plays into the fact that he hasn't been able to adapt, but it also shows very clearly that the coaching staff doesn't trust him as much as they should. You look at analytics, and analytics aren't everything, right? I flashed this thing up before, right, with all the stats. And what does it mean? Bubkis. Because at the end of the day, stats can be deceiving, right? Goals and assists, clear as day. Penalty minutes, no issue. But everything else, when you take a look at it as far as goals above expected and all these other fancy stats that are out there, Corsi, Fenwick, you name it. Offensive zone start percentage, defensive zone start percentage, all those things. The one thing that you need to bear in mind here is that all those metrics can be construed to either show a player being horrible or good, depending on the situation, right? And so a lot of the media has pointed to horrible metrics. But just like anything else, stats can be made to be deceiving. And so I don't put too much credence into it. And from what I've seen from Bolduc, I've seen good effort. I haven't seen him not work his tail off. And, maybe his reads are poor at this point, but you can't expect him to learn all that in practice. And there's also the point of inconsistency of other young players adjusting, right? You take a look around the team. They've got to, not only does he have to adjust to a new system, but the players that play with him have to adjust to him and understand where Bolduc's going to be. It's a two-way street. It's not as simple as, okay, we're playing man-to-man, learn. You also have to know what your teammates are doing. And when guys are as offensively gifted as Nick Suzuki and Cole Caufield, that can be a tricky thing to do. It takes a lot of work. And so in Bolduc's case, I think if you were to sit down and watch some video to see where he was going wrong, it would help him long term. Now, of course, these last couple of days, today being a day off, tomorrow being practice, those days have been limited. So obviously the Canadiens don't force players to do anything on their days off. But when you're a kid like Bolduc and you're trying to stamp your place on a hockey team like Montreal, you got to go above and beyond. So you don't necessarily have to be on the ice, but you could be in the coach's office, you could be in the video room, you could be doing other things to show that you're trying to make yourself better. Just that effort changes what you look like in the eyes of the coach. So those are the things that he needs to work on. And what's working for him is he's shown that he pays attention to detail and he's trying to adapt. He's physical and he does occasionally throw hits. He just has to do it a little bit more often. And, he was getting power play time. Now, because of his demotion, even that's been taken away. And that's a thing, okay, I can understand it because Slafkovsky obviously has better chemistry with Cole Caufield and Nick Suzuki. But, with Demidov there and Hudson, that first unit has come back to life. But the second unit doesn't see enough ice, and so Bolduc is not getting as much power play time as he did before. And he's lethal in the bumper. That's not to say that Slafkovsky can't be, because we saw that just yesterday. So what is he going to have to do to regain his ice time? Well, if he gets trusted 5-on-5, that's how he's going to get his power play time back. But to overall label him, like a lot of people have, as a defensive liability at -4, take a step back, okay? Here's the thing about those minus numbers. They're a line stat. They're not an individual stat. And oftentimes players get caught in two different situations. Either they're coming onto the ice and the play's already engaged in the zone. There's nothing they can do about it. Puck ends up in the back of the net. They end up with a minus for nothing. But the other thing is they're at the mercy of their defensemen. And as I've outlined multiple times in the last few shows, the Canadiens' defense has been making errors in coverage. Very simple. Okay? And it's errors in coverage that need to be fixed. So how do you fix the man-to-man? I'll get to that in a minute. I'll also get to the Canadiens' philosophical change. But the one thing I want to look at is Bolduc versus Texier, and why Texier is getting more ice time than Bolduc, right? And especially with the second line, because that's where I would want to see Bolduc. I think he could be productive as that quasi-physical presence on the second line if he's given that opportunity. You know, take him aside, tell him, listen, I need you to do this, this, and that. Show me what you can do. And give the kid an opportunity. Because Texier, up to this point, in his Montreal Canadiens tenure, has shown me nothing. Okay? He has a propensity to take the puck and dump it into the zone, and he doesn't chase it down himself and lets his line mates do the work. Okay? He's not good in his own zone either. He doesn't get engaged physically, despite the fact that he's a bigger guy. So why is he getting all the flowers and getting up to the second line when a guy like Bolduc, who's been working with the team since the beginning of the year and has looked good at times, is not getting that opportunity? That's the question I ask myself. Both guys are not great defensively, right? So why is he gaining favor with his strengths? Well, apparently he's very versatile as a forward in both positions. I haven't seen that yet. That may very well have been the case in a zone defense, just like Zach Bolduc, but at 5-on-5, I really haven't seen anything to tell me that he's good or not good defensively. You know, there's a guy here that's trying to bet on himself and show that he deserves to be in the NHL, just like a guy like Joe Veleno. You don't see Joe Veleno getting a shot on the second line, do you? So why would you not give a guy like Joe Veleno that opportunity, given his track record, and give it to somebody like Alexandre Texier, who is nowhere near that caliber player? If you take the two of them and you look at Bolduc and you look at Texier, here's the one thing that that Texier has on him. He's a better stick handler. Above and beyond that, I don't think there's a single piece of Texier's game that is even close to what Bolduc can bring to the table, whether it's offensively or defensively. Okay? So he's 6'1". He hovers around 200 pounds, but he doesn't use his body that way. So that's not really an asset for Texier. So where Texier still has question marks is exactly that. He's not very physical. He's not consistent, right? He doesn't chase his own pucks down. His defensive zone numbers are just as bad, if not worse, than Bolduc's. And his role with the Canadiens right now is in flux. Nobody knows exactly where he fits in on the roster. So why the second line? I mean, that's not why he was brought in. He was brought in to be a bottom six forward, but you're putting him on the second line with Kapanen and Demidov. Why? If you out there as fans can give me an intelligent answer to that, as far as offense and defense, don't look at it from one side. I'm telling you, when I look at it from both sides and I look at offense and defense combined for both players, yes, Texier has had a 30-point season, and Bolduc hasn't had that opportunity yet. Bolduc in his third year, right? And admittedly, Texier can be a more skilled player. But the reason why he's gone from St. Louis via unconditional waivers is because of the fact that he wasn't producing. He had 1 point in 8 games. So you're going to take away what Bolduc has done, 6 goals, 6 assists in 26 games so far this season, to the, say, 2 assists that Texier has. Yeah, there's no comparison there for me. So I I urge you in the comments, go ahead and tell me exactly why you think Bolduc is not a better option than Texier at the side of Demidov and Kapanen. I want to know. And honestly, I'm not being sarcastic here. I'm trying to understand it because in my mind, that's not the case. I can't envision it because Texier hasn't shown me enough one way or the other to merit being on that line. It's as simple as that. But when I look at it and I say to myself, okay, in past circumstances, the Montreal Canadiens have always had patience with players to learn, to adapt, to get used to situations, right? And so in my mind, I'm thinking, what's changed? Well, I had to dig deep and I had to ask myself one very simple question. Has there been a philosophical shift in the rebuild for the Montreal Canadiens? Because early on, we knew there was a focus on development only. They weren't worried about winning, right? But ever since they got to the playoffs last year and they've elevated the bar this year saying, okay, they want to win a round, well, now things have changed. It's no longer we can develop players at the NHL level without consequences. There are consequences. And so I think philosophically, the organization has shifted from being a team that doesn't mind developing players at the NHL level to actually winning at the NHL level. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the timing is bad for guys like Zach Bolduc. Because at the end of it all, if this was a year and a half ago, Bolduc would still be on the same line and learning on the job. Whereas now, it's, let me take him off that line. I don't have the patience. Let's put somebody else in there and see how it works, right? So when you take a look at things like the signing of Texier to try to augment the team's offense, doesn't mean they were looking at him from a defensive posture because God knows, as I mentioned, Texier is not a defensive stalwart. You know, you take a look at the ice time and how it's being distributed. We all have complained about Ivan Demidov and the amount of time that he's gotten on the ice. But as he gets better, as Oliver Kapanen gets better, and as they're trusted more by their coach, which we've seen in recent games, especially last night versus the Winnipeg Jets where they got more ice time than usual, then what you see is, okay, they're getting better, we're going to up their ice time. That's actually going to hurt guys like Bolduc and Texier down the road, especially if Texier gets pushed off that line for somebody else. You're going to see him back on the third line. Bolduc is on the fourth right now, and his ice time is going to go from 9 minutes down to 7 based on the fact that Marty St. Louis is going to want to give more ice time to that second line because if they're productive and they're good defensively, he's going to want them out on the ice. Now, as far as the in-game strategy and philosophy is concerned by the Canadiens, they're no longer that dump and chase team that we hated back in the 90s and 2000s. They now like to carry the puck into the zone and maintain possession, right? They only dump the puck in when there's no options and they need to retrieve it deep in the zone. They get it deep. They carry it, instead of carrying it in, they dump it because there's no space to go, and then they go in hard for retrieval. You know, those are all things that the Canadiens didn't do before because a couple of years ago, the Canadiens were like, always keep possession of the puck. Don't dump it in. Now, they're using a hybrid when they come into the zone so that the lines 1 and 2 have more of a propensity to carry the puck in, and lines 3 and 4 are more the dump and chase type of teams because of the lack of overall skill. Now, here's the thing. With Texier there, as I mentioned, he's a guy who is used to taking the puck and dumping it in. That is what the St. Louis Blues did. They dumped the puck in, they went in hard on the forecheck, retrieved it with support, and cycled it to be able to get scoring opportunities. That's not how the Canadiens play. The Canadiens are a transition team. So when you bring the puck in and you carry it in on one of the top two lines, you're expected to create scoring chances. You're expected to create offense. And you're expected to use your original thought to be able to create that offense. You don't necessarily have to be as stringent as they used to be, where there's a system in place offensively. There isn't. Marty's been very open about that. He gives players concepts based on their roles. And so the role of the first and second line, obviously, is to score goals while playing a defensively minded, sound game. So for Texier to just keep continuing to dump the puck in, expecting somebody like Oliver Kapanen or Demidov to come in on the forecheck and pick it up, it's irresponsible. So he's got to be better at carrying the puck into the zone and knowing when not to. But that's another philosophical change that the Canadiens have made this season, where they're more often than not going to carry the puck in as opposed to dumping it in. So, yeah, the Canadiens are in that transitional phase. They've switched from being the team that is developing at the NHL level to a team that's looking more towards winning. So, if that's the case, what does that mean for some of the other players, especially guys like Bolduc? As I mentioned, when you're struggling, when you need to make corrections to your game and the coach is telling you, you've got to be better defensively, it's not just on the coach to teach you. It never was. I mean, when I played, I'll give you an example. When I played junior hockey, my coach, God bless him, Sylvain Dubé, was not the greatest X's and O's guy. He was a raw type of coach. Wasn't the guy who, would teach you different plays. And so what I did was I taught myself. And I had to, whether it was reading through books, looking at different games, understanding different situations. I would actually go out and pre-scout some of the teams we'd play just to see how they played and where I can adapt my game to be successful. Was I? I was. I ended up leading my team in scoring along with my line mate. Why? Well, one, because we played together for a very long time. And two, because I put in the effort. I wasn't the most skilled forward. I can tell you that. I was more of the defensive-minded presence, just like Bolduc is expected to be. But that didn't mean I had to relegate myself to just playing that one side of the game. I still taught myself to be better offensively. I taught myself to drive the net. I taught myself to keep my feet moving when I had other players on my back. I learned how to pass. I taught myself how to take a really wicked slap shot. All those things that people take for granted as you're coming up the ranks. They're all things that you continue to develop year after year. In some cases, like mine, I didn't develop a slap shot till I hit bantam, which was at 15 years old. My line mate never had a slap shot. Couldn't take one if his life depended on it. But I could, and I had a good one. And so I took advantage of it. I taught myself how to take one-timers. How? I used a couple of pieces of rock and a very tight rubber band. And I'd pass the puck off the rubber band back to myself and take one-timers on the rink around the corner from my house. Simple stuff, right? Stuff that people take for granted. There are a lot of kids these days, when you talk about development, that don't work on their game at that level. They'll go to practice, they'll go through the drills, and they'll think it's enough. It's not. The ones that rise to the top, the ones that are the cream of the crop, as we say, those are the guys that go the extra mile when it comes to development. When you take a look at guys like Lane Hutson and Ivan Demidov, who are among the most skilled players in the National Hockey League at this moment, what's the one key thing you could say about them? They go on the ice more often to work on their game. I repeat, their game. Not the team game, not the philosophy, not the strategy, their game. Because it's like your toolbox when you're a mechanic, right? If you don't have the right tools to do your job, you're not going to be able to do it effectively. The same holds true for Lane Hutson, who is a smaller defenseman, but is very heavy on his shiftiness and stick handling to be able to be effective. The same holds true for Ivan Demidov. He is a highly skilled player who depends primarily on his thought process and puck retrieval and stick handling ability to create plays. That doesn't mean he can't shoot. He can. But it also means that he depends on that part of the game, his stick handling, his puck retrieval, etc., to be able to create offense for himself. We've seen him do it. Just last night when he fed Kapanen to score Kapanen's goal. He used his body to shield his opponent from the puck, one hand on his stick, brought the second hand down, fired a pass into the slot that nobody thought he'd be able to do. That doesn't happen because you see it on video because your coach tells you to do it. It happens because you adapt to a play based on the skill set you've developed yourself. And that's where we are here. When it comes to the Montreal Canadiens, they're at a point where now they're focused on winning, but their focus on winning also comes with a further commitment by the players to better themselves from a developmental standpoint. Whether it's them going on the ice for extra drills with Adam Nicholas, specific to certain things that they want to work on, which they have at their disposal, even in the summer, to going to the video room and sitting down with the video coaches and looking at games and watching gameplay and understanding where they need to be and where they need to adjust. Professional hockey players have all these things at their disposal to make themselves better. So in saying that, and coming back to the whole subject of this video, Zach Bolduc at this point needs to learn that he needs to commit himself more to getting on the ice more often in order to develop the skills defensively that he needs to be better. And that would mean probably him working with Lane Hutson on puck retrieval, getting the pucks away from him, finishing hits, stuff like that, being tight man-to-man on players. Super important. And who better to do it against than Lane Hutson, who is the shiftiest player in the Canadiens. And he's the type of kid who wouldn't mind the extra ice either. So why not ask him? Ball's in Zach's court. By the same token, the ball's in Zach's court where he needs to go over to the video coach and say, Coach, I need examples of me missing my defensive responsibilities and not doing the right thing. Done. That's what the video coaches are there for. He also needs to go out there and talk to Adam Nicholas about getting drills to work on his ability to change direction so that he's better at man-to-man. All those things are all tools he has at his disposal. But the one thing that he needs to realize is the team's not going to push him to do it. The Canadiens are done doing that now. It's up to the player. And that's where we are in the rebuild, where the team focus has switched from development to winning. The player's focus has to switch from team development to individual development. And once they realize that, and once that message gets across, the Canadiens are going to be a better team for it. So looking ahead to tomorrow's show, we're going to take a look at, obviously, the preview of Saturday's game versus the Toronto Maple Leafs, another team that's struggling right now. And then, of course, maybe, just maybe, we might talk a little bit about what I wanted to do today, and that is rebound control and what to expect as a goaltender when it comes to rebounds. 5 different kinds. I told you, I saw a video. It's fantastic. I'm going to bring those elements up because I think you're going to find them fascinating, and they're going to clear up some misconceptions about the goaltending position. I'm sure of it because they did for me. Thanks once again for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and we'll see you tomorrow.